Doing us live from RubyCast Live. I'm your host, Rubinia Moon, and today we're going to be talking about, is the internet toxic? That's such a broad question, and I think there's not a simple answer to it. But, yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to start getting into the more controversial topics. I started off easy with easier topics to talk about that won't cause so much controversy, but I think now it's starting to become the time to really delve in to some of the nitty-gritty topics. And the first question is the internet toxic? I think as a whole, the internet is a great thing. It brings so many people together that otherwise would never be together. It gives me something to do, a hobby that I'm interested in. There's so many people that I would never have met if the internet didn't exist. I wouldn't have gone on this journey, and I wouldn't be doing this with my life. And I think at the same time, we wouldn't have the same gaming community that we have now. I mean, the reason why the internet is so good is because it provides so many things. Skyrim mods, the whole Skyrim mod community, the whole Fallout community as well, with the whole modding community in general. Okay, the internet has given us that, and it's given us so many things that is simply unbelievable. I can now talk with someone who is in Asia. Online, I can talk with them without having to pay extra money or without even knowing their phone number. I can be talking with someone from Asia, someone from Europe, someone from Africa, someone from South America. Heck, I could talk to the penguins if I needed to in Antarctica. There's so much goodness that the internet has given us. And with that goodness have come really bad things as well. The good thing about the internet is that it's such a broad spectrum. I mean, it lets you explore your identity on your own without having to really put yourself out there if you don't want to. It helps give you an understanding of what people feel, how people feel. It allows you to understand other people's opinions. It allows you to have discourse and converse with people who don't have your same opinions. The internet allows you to do so many things that is so good. But with those good things comes bad things as well. At any second, anywhere in the world, you can tweet out your feelings. You can share so much information, and it gives you a sense of anonymity as well. You can be completely anonymous online through your computer screen. No one will ever know that it's you unless you say so, unless you post a picture of yourself. No one will know who you are. And because of that, it allows people to do things that they otherwise would never do. It allows people to be brutal in their assessments, which can either be a really good thing or a really, really bad thing. It allows people to have the I guess, courage to speak out. Because no one has to know who they are in order to do so. But it also allows people to take advantage of that anonymity and, say whatever they want without any consequences, really. The whole cancel culture, mob mentality, it gets easier with the internet, and it gets more dangerous with the internet as well. We now have the ability to go out of our little bubbles, and explore the world in a single touch. They used to say, you could travel the whole world in a library. You could, read so many books from different countries and understand different cultures, and you could. The internet is basically the biggest library in the world. It allows you to explore places that you would never ever go to. It allows you to see places that you would never otherwise be able to see. It allows you to have immense knowledge, and you can do so much with that knowledge. Not all of the knowledge is 100% true. And it allows you to also convene and maybe come up with opinions that are not so smart or not so right. It allows you to do so many things. But there is a problem with the internet. You can't delete the internet. You can't delete what you post on the internet. It gives you this facade that you can, but you really can't. As soon as you post anything, someone's already taken a screenshot of it. Someone has reposted it somewhere. Someone has saved it onto their computer. And it will never truly go away. And that can be a problem on the internet, because sometimes we say stupid things. Sometimes we say things in the heat of the moment. Sometimes we say things that are not so good. And sometimes it can lead us into a not so good place. But it can't be taken back. You can apologize for it. And, it's unclear whether apologies actually work. I think for rational people, all they want is an apology. And to know that you'll do better. And proof that you'll do better. But then there's also people that will never, ever let it go. There's people who don't understand what forgiveness really is. It's not just words, it's actions, Actions speak louder than words. If you say, I forgive you, but then you hold it over my head my entire life, have you really forgiven me? And, I think that's where the internet gets a little bit toxic sometimes, because it doesn't know when to let things go. There's not really a black and white answer when that is, because there's so many factors, so many different things that go into it, and it's not always so clear either. It's not really clear at all, really at all, because there's so many different opinions, and everyone is welcome to their own opinions, and it's sometimes hard to figure out what overall is the right thing to do. Some things you probably shouldn't forget. Some things might not be forgivable or as forgivable as other things. And sometimes we just like to be hypocrites. And sometimes we like to have scapegoats. Someone we can blame. Someone that we can put our problems on. If we figured, maybe Kim Kardashian is not so good. Or maybe I can use that to my advantage. Maybe if Kim Kardashian can't be good, then, maybe that makes my life better somehow. I think that's a lot of the internet's mentality, is that if someone is doing something worse, it makes me better. And so we're so quick to call people out. We're so quick to cancel people or just somehow end it. And, whether that's the right thing to do or not, who knows? No, it's not the right thing to do. But sometimes we like to think that it is. And, who do we forgive? If, for example, Shane Dawson actually came on the internet and said, "I'm sorry," and actually took responsibility for the things that he did, would we forgive him? I think the evidence shows not really. I mean, some people don't have to. You never have to forgive someone, technically speaking. Technically, you don't have to do it. And, I think a lot of the times we like to hold people accountable and, make sure that they do right. But we don't like to give them the chance to do right. We don't like to give them the chance to prove that they can do better. And I think that's, in a sense, one of the reasons why the internet is toxic, because it's hard to escape that. Once you're in the spotlight, once you've done something, people don't really like to let it go. Or if they do, they'll wait 10 years and then they'll bring it back up. And they'll look at what you've done in the past 10 years. And it doesn't, the internet has no boundaries. You can't just erase people's memories because it's there. You can try and delete it, but it's probably going to get reposted somewhere. In a day and age where anything can be recorded, anything can be screenshotted, anything can be captured on a whatever device, there's no real ability to just delete everything. You have the ability to move on, but most people don't know how to do that. And more importantly, we have so many people that have a lot of issues that they use the internet to escape from. And sometimes that escape is not something that is good. Sometimes that escape comes with strings attached, and they're so eager to blame someone else for the issues, even though it won't solve them at all. We like to think that the celebrities, the famous people, they're just, they can make mistakes too. I think, although we seem to forget that celebrities are people too, and celebrities are able to make mistakes because they're just like you and me. The only difference is that he might have a few $100 million more than us, But that doesn't mean that they are not, able to make mistakes, not able to say things that they might regret, not able to have remorse. And we look at people and we judge them for things that they did 20 years ago. People still, talk about Robert Pattinson. He's done so many movies afterwards, but all people think about is Twilight, because that was the popular thing that he did, and that was the thing that kind of sucked, and, we like to blame the people for it. Or Rebecca Black with Friday, where people held that over her head for 10 years, and, she was, 15, 16, maybe younger? She was just a kid who got manipulated into doing a bad deal. people, sent death threats after a child, basically. I mean, not a child. I think she was like a teen or something like that. But still, it doesn't matter, right? Because people, it really shouldn't matter what age people are. Whether they're 100, whether they're 50, whether they're 30, whether they're 16, it shouldn't really matter. We just should be able to treat people with respect, even if we don't necessarily like them. Although that's a little bit hard to ask the internet to do because, people like to speak their minds, and some people don't like to have a filter at all. And whether that's a bad thing or a good thing, it really depends. People really shouldn't be censored, but then they are, and then also the internet is very touchy as well. There's always going to be someone who's offended by what you say. And some people would be offended by that statement. And sometimes it can be really hurtful, especially when it's the only thing that we hear. Sometimes we just get tired of hearing the same thing over and over and over again, and so we just lose it, and then maybe that's like the breaking point. And I think sometimes, the internet can be really cruel to people. Whether they deserve it or not, who knows? It's hard to determine who deserves what. I don't think anyone deserves people sending death threats to them or people celebrating their death. Although that's a hard thing to think about because, some people, maybe they did such bad things that, I don't know, maybe they deserve it. But, I don't really think that's the case necessarily. A lot of people don't really care if someone died or not. They're just going to be the same way. And you can't really control that either. And then on top of that, you have companies that kind of determine it for you. And not in a fair way at all. You have YouTube that demonetizes every video except the ones that actually should be demonetized. You have Twitter that likes to enforce the rules in a very strange way that doesn't really make any sense. And you have Twitch, this very platform that we're on that likes to ban people for no reason and then unban them and then reban them and then unban them again. I don't know. It's a confusing system. And then we also have this mentality that we have to be on these platforms because there's not really an alternative. I mean, there isn't really an alternative. Although when the alternatives do pop up, we are quick to shut them down anyways. So, who knows? I think the simpler answer is that people just don't like change. And I get that. I also don't really like change in general. It's a very scary thing. When something suddenly changes in your life, it's very scary. You don't know what's going to happen next. That's just kind of life. But, sometimes it's a little bit worse than what we might think. And sometimes it's not as bad as we think, but we like to blow things out of proportion. We like to think, this is the worst thing. How dare someone swear on the internet? Meanwhile, we have no issues with people posting really not so good content. And I mean really not so good content. We have videos of people literally killing cats on the internet. I'm not talking about Lindy either. Although we'll talk about her as well. Where you have people literally killing their cats on the internet. That's there for years. Monetized. no punishment, no nothing. Guess it didn't really come up on the systems. Meanwhile, you have fake road rage that gets demonetized or whatever, copy striked. It's just really bizarre. And then you have people that do bad things, but then you don't know. But then they claim that they changed. They say they're sorry. People don't know how to let it go. And maybe Lindy does deserve to get banned, but then people just really don't know how to let it go. There are some people who want to make it their job to ban Alinity. And I don't know if that's exactly fair. I mean, it's been, 5 years already? The point is that people want to see her punished, finally. But, if she's not punished now, is she really going to be? Would it really be fair to punish her now if she hasn't been punished for things that she did 3 years ago? Who knows? Some people would say, hell yeah, let's punish her. Others would say, well, maybe not. Isn't the point of calling out things with the Lindy and everything, and, making a point of how Twitch has been hypocritical, isn't the point it's to actually lessen the punishments? Because, I think that really should be the goal, is that showing the hypocrisy by showing that this is ridiculous. I don't know. People are weird. I don't even understand what the internet really wants with this whole Alinity thing. And people really should just move on. But people are going to be obsessed with banning Alinity until the day they die. And I have a feeling that is a true statement, and that people won't ever let it go. Unless she actually gets banned, which, let's be honest, she's not going to get banned. At least not yet. At least not until she, murders someone. And, maybe that's unfair. Maybe she should be. I don't know. I'm a person who always likes to forgive people. I have a bad habit of forgiving people. And a bad habit of giving people the benefit of the doubt. And understanding that, people do make mistakes. People learn from them. And, people should have the opportunity to show that they've changed. I don't know if that means they should necessarily get unbanned if they're banned, but, if it's been 20 years, maybe they deserve a second shot without, I don't know. You have this whole situation with Leafy as well, who was banned on YouTube for talking about Pokemon too much. Meanwhile, you have people who make 20 videos about one person, and maybe they don't say the nicest things on the internet. I think there's definitely political bias as well, because it seems to be the mentality that if the person deserves to be talked about or talked about like that, then it's fine. It's fine to give certain people, death threats and threaten their lives, but it's not okay to do it when the people don't deserve it. And, that deserving part gets really strange sometimes. People have a really loose definition about who deserves what. And they change their mind constantly about who deserves what. And people are so quick to jump on the defensive side. And, who knows, maybe it's not. But there's no really reasoning. I mean, once people have made up their minds, they're pretty much set. Especially when they haven't actually seen the actual thing or read the actual thing that is being called out. And so they just believe what they're being told. And I mean, I like to believe that people can be honest and tell the truth, but I also understand that that's not really the case at all. The internet is so bizarre in their judgments. Like, they're so sensitive about nudity and erotic content and stuff like that. And furries and bronies, they're so obsessed with them. But then they don't care when there's literal pedophiles or, stuff like that. It's bizarre. And it's not like some people do have a problem with those things, just not enough people have a problem with those things, so that they just stay. I mean, people obsess about why grown men like colorful ponies, but then they don't really question why grown men like underage girls or women. People also don't understand that women can do bad things too, and many women do bad things. It's like, oh, I didn't know that I could never tell a lie as a woman. Even though I have so many times. Let's be honest, everyone's lied. We'd like to try and get the best outcome for ourselves, and so we'll lie in order to do that. It's very gray. Everything's gray. It's not black and white anymore. Everything is just gray. The whole world is gray. Because who knows? I mean, people do have valid points. Maybe some people do deserve it. But then, maybe it's not the people that we say deserves it. I feel like the whole internet is just a giant gray area. Because it's really not clear. And sometimes the right answer is not clear at all. Sometimes we just have no idea. And then sometimes we don't really want to speak out because we understand that if we do, we're just going to get attacked for doing so. That's what we're learning as well. Is that speaking out, having a different opinion is not a good idea. Because then you'll just get attacked yourself. And it's happened so many times that it's pretty much proven. And people don't just hate change. They also don't like different opinions. And we all like to hear that people have our opinions, unpopular even. And it gets hard when all you hear is that people don't have your opinion. And then you start to think, oh, maybe I'm wrong. But that's not quite true. You can have different opinions. There is actually an ability that you have. It's just not always clear that you can. Because people sometimes make it way bigger. People like to make things a big deal when they don't have to be. And I think that's been pretty proven, honestly. There's definitely good things that have come out of the internet. 100%. I wouldn't be here talking about this if good things didn't come from the internet. But then there's also bad things. What are you going to do about the bad things? There's not really anything you really can do because it's just not that simple. I mean, it doesn't help that you have 250 characters to explain yourself. And yes, you could technically make a tweet longer, but let's be honest, nobody actually reads those things unless it's like really serious. Like no one reads the entire tweet longer. If you have to make a tweet longer, no one's gonna read it. So basically, you have 250 words to explain yourself, and you also have the inability to express your emotions through that. And so people just assume your emotions and assume that you're either being aggressive or you're being offensive or you're being something, and maybe you are. There's times where people are being offensive. That's the whole point. But then there's also times where people don't intend to offend and people take it all the way to left field, and it's very complicated. The whole point is that it's complicated. Yeah. And the thing is that you can say the whole thing is, if you're not popular, famous, whatever, then people don't necessarily care as much. But then if you get popular and then later people look at your tweets later and they don't like what you said when you weren't popular, that becomes a problem. Sometimes you just have a really bad day and you want to just rant. And you say things that, maybe partly you do believe, but then you also don't believe. Like, honestly, it's really complicated. Like, I'm speaking in a general sense of things, but you can't really generalize the internet because there's always going to be someone who thinks different. There's always going to be that case. I think that people are starting to care more about what not popular people have to say, though. I think this whole topic is complicated because there's instances where it's not far off, but then there's instances where it's taken a little bit out of proportion, or it's kind of just assumed and people just agree with it. I don't know. It's very complicated. This is why I don't like to talk about these types of things in general, is because it's hard to convey my opinions in a way where it makes a whole lot of sense. And sometimes I do contradict myself because I don't really have a full grasp of what I'm trying to say. When it comes to my morals, I try my hardest to take into consideration how other people will feel. And that's the exact reason why I don't typically talk about politics, religion, yada, yada, yada. I just try to avoid all of that because it's just, there's never a right answer. There's what you think people will want to hear, but then it's like it ends up not being what they want to hear, or it's so complicated. But I don't think anyone has it's no one's really duty to care about others when they're engaging, but then there's also you could be a little bit nicer, but then it's like, but you don't really have to be, and there's no real way to control that. Like, if someone doesn't want to be nice to someone, you're not gonna make them be nice by telling them that they should be nice. Like, it's kind of a thing where, I don't know, people just don't care. You know, the internet is a place where people really don't care, especially because there's that whole anonymity thing where, like, what are you going to do about them? Arrest them? Like, you can only do that with the people that are actually, like, publicly have everything online, you know, have their full name on the internet. I mean, yes, you could technically trace their IPs, but a lot of people use VPNs anyway, so it's not like it's really going to do much. Like, it's so hard to enforce the internet because most of the time you really can't do anything about it. Yeah, you can technically ban them, but then they're just gonna pop up somewhere else. You know, you can't censor the internet no matter how hard you try. You can't censor anyone because there's always gonna be a place where they can talk, and there's always gonna be someone who will listen. I think a lot of people like to think, oh, you know, I'm too small, so it doesn't really matter what I say. No, people, there's anything that you post, someone has read. You know, maybe that's not just like statistically true. There's a lot of things that have like 0 views or 0 reads or whatever. And yeah, a lot of things do get like swept under the rug and nobody reads it. But I always like to think, you know, there's always one person. There's always one person who reads it, maybe screenshots it, maybe reposts it somewhere. I mean, that's honestly the mentality that most people have. Is that, you know, it's like most people have the mentality, I honestly don't give a shit. Because people don't know who I am, so why does it matter? You know, there's nothing they can do about it, really. I mean, at the end of the day, there's really nothing you can do about it. I mean, on the off chance they actually commit a crime, you can maybe get them arrested, but that's like 1 in a million. Most people don't actually break the laws when they are talking. And, you know, maybe the laws are outdated because they probably are. But it's also like you can't really enforce the laws because it's global. You know, what's illegal in your country might not actually be illegal in their country. And then you have situations like, for example, T-Series versus PewDiePie, where you have India who says, yeah, that's defamation. And then you have the UK or the United States or whatever who says, no, that's not defamation. And then you have to consider, okay, then which laws do we enforce? Do we enforce India's laws? Or do we enforce the UK or the United States? And the simple answer is that you can't. You can't enforce any of the laws because, you know, well, I mean, there's like global laws that are very similar, and, you know, there's some laws that are the same. But then at the same time, even if you have similar laws, sometimes you have different laws. Like, it's like it might be the same law, but it's worded differently, and so it's enforced differently. It's like in the US, we have freedom of speech. We can say what we want. We can do what we want pretty much, with some exceptions. And then there's the UK that has something similar, but it's not the exact same. And then you have Germany, who has another similar law, but it's not exactly the same thing. Like, there's always going to be an instance where it's not the exact same law. Like, it has a similar concept, but it's not the same. And then you have, like, Canada, who is, like, banning people or making laws against misgendering, where here, like, we don't really have any of those laws. And so the question is, like, which ones do you actually enforce? I mean, people say, oh, you should enforce the laws that you are a citizen to, or you're actually, you know, living in. You should follow those laws. But then, like, how do you know what country anyone is living in? I mean, let's be honest. Technically, the internet, there's no such. I mean, it depends. I mean, there is such thing as free speech, but there's also companies that have the right to enforce their laws or their rules, their guidelines. And if they determine that you can't talk about it, then you can't talk about it. There's been this debate about, should should companies be held accountable? Should they, like, if they declare themselves a publisher, can they really enforce anything? And you get into this really complicated area where, I mean, technically speaking, if they're a publisher, then they should be able to publish anything. But then it's also, they're still a private business, so they have the right to enforce their business. Like, it's like the whole thing. They have the right to refuse service to anyone, because that's what the businesses have that right. And so, if businesses have the right to refuse service to anyone for any reason, then Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch all have that right, and they can do that. They can say, hey, we don't want you here. And then you're gone. And it doesn't have to be necessarily that because you broke a law or broke a rule. It can just be that they just didn't want you on their platform anymore. And, now we're kind of in an area where people do not like that at all and will lash back at these companies. But then again, it's still their right. And then you also have, technically Twitter, I believe, resides in the U.S., so technically they have to enforce U.S. laws. But then that's also not really the case anymore because, a lot of these companies have headquarters everywhere. They have headquarters in Europe. They have headquarters in Asia that enforce their rules. So, who actually knows? Like, should you really just be considering the laws where the company is founded? Is that the only laws that we should consider? Or should we consider the laws where they all are? Because let's be honest, a lot of these companies have already branched out with I mean, yeah, it's like you have the freedom of speech. You can say whatever you want. But when you say whatever you want, you also have consequences. And the company is it also has the freedom to express their opinion about your opinion. And if they don't like what you're saying, yes, they can, in fact, ban you. Because it's not like they're arresting you. It's not like, I don't know, I mean, it's so complicated. It's so complicated. It's like the whole argument, there was like a whole argument about, I think Jubilee had like this whole debate about cancel culture. And someone brought up, like, if let's say Coca-Cola did something really bad. I mean, they have, but let's say they did something so unforgivable. Should companies then, and then stores then take Coca-Cola off of their shelves? But as a consumer, we didn't have the opportunity or the chance to make that decision for ourselves. To say, you know what, I don't want to do business with Coca-Cola. We never had that opportunity. But if the businesses kept Coca-Cola on their shelves, people would criticize Coca-Cola or that company, that business, whatever, for keeping Coca-Cola on their shelves because Coca-Cola did bad things or whatever. And it's like, okay, so where is the, like, because, like, yes, we should have the ability to make the decision of whether or not we want to do business with whatever company has done bad things. But at the same time, The business has the right to determine whether or not they want to do business with that company for what they've done, whatever they've done. And there's also the thing where oftentimes the product that we want to cancel has more than one person running it. Okay? So let's take, for example, an infamous example, Subway. Obviously, their owner did really bad things and is in jail for it. But that doesn't mean that the whole company should go under, because not everyone in the company did pedophilic things. Right? So, at the end of the day, the only one you're punishing when you try to sort of boycott these businesses, you're punishing everyone that has a job there for the actions of one person. And I mean, sometimes that one person, though, has a lot of power. Like Susan Wojcicki, who has the ability to determine who gets seen and who gets not seen on YouTube. And so, like, the only way to really send a message is to do exactly that, to just stop using the services. But then it's easier said than done, because a lot of people have their businesses, people have their jobs literally on YouTube, and so you can't just tell them to pack up and leave and not make any money. So you just end up with this winding circle where people want to leave YouTube, but creators don't want to leave YouTube because they don't want to be out of a job, and there's not really an alternative. But then when an alternative pops up, people don't really want to risk losing their job for a smaller business who might not be able to pay them at all, like Mixer. Like, who knows? Maybe it'll just go under. Maybe the new thing will just go under. And everyone has that fear that the next thing will just go under. And so they never want to take that risk of jumping to it. And so then the company does go under because nobody's there. And we just end up in this huge cycle of competitors coming up, but then nobody wants to try them out. No one wants to give them a chance because they're afraid that it will fail, and then because of that they do fail. It's so funny sometimes. And then the biggest problem is that you never actually know what will get you banned. Because companies like to lie to you a lot. And sometimes, every single company's terms of service is oftentimes made so that they can ban literally anyone for any reason. It doesn't matter. If they don't like you, they can ban you. A lot of times that the terms of service are expressed in that way, where technically speaking, anything you post could actually be banned. That's what YouTube does. Is that if you've actually read YouTube's community guidelines, word for word, technically speaking, every single thing that you can ever post on YouTube is banned. YouTube determines which of the content they actually want to enforce. But you never know which parts they're actually going to enforce. And so you end up with situations where pedophiles and child abusers and animal abusers are all online and unbanned and not punished at all. And then you have stuff like fake road rage that gets banned immediately. Or 4 years later. And then you also have the other factor that goes into it is that the people making these situations are all in different countries. which means that all of them are trained to or have grown up knowing one particular thing is bad. And so they're going to enforce it because they understand that, from their understanding, that is a bad thing. And so then nobody's ever on the right page because everyone's from so many different countries that they, especially the third world countries, who are looking at these videos, and to them, yeah, it's the worst possible thing. But then, everyone who is in the first world countries are like, no, what? And unfortunately, there's a lot of gray area. I mean, the question is, shouldn't discourse be allowed? Like, if someone has a different opinion, wouldn't you actually, rather than actually say that different opinion, then do you never know why someone thinks the way they do? I mean, I always like to consider why. Like, for example, if someone is a racist and saying racist things, then I want to know why. What made them think those things? Why do they say that these people do these things? Are they just trying to be hateful, or is there a deeper root to the thing that they're trying to say? I mean, wouldn't you rather want to know who is racist than to not know ever? I mean, I don't want to know. Because as soon as I know, it's a lot harder to say that I don't know. And then that's also a lot of people's mentalities, that they just don't want to know. They just don't want to know. They don't want to know. And there's some people that think, okay, well, celebrities should not be able to say anything on social media. And you know what? I've had the mentality so many times where I just want these celebrities to shut up. But then they have the right to actually talk about those things. So it's not really my place to really tell people what to do. And it's not really anyone's place to tell people what to do. I mean, if you're a moderator, you should be enforcing what you're moderating. But that can only go so far. And you can't really think about yourself. You have to think about the home brand or company that you're representing. You can't just ban someone because you don't like them. You actually have to have reason. Or at least that's what people think. I mean, let's be honest. A lot of times people do ban people because they don't like them. Not necessarily because they actually did something wrong. It's just really complicated. I think for the most part, though, for everything that bad that has happened on the internet, whether it's cancel culture, mob mentality, whatever, I think overall, we wouldn't be able to survive without the internet. The internet has done some really great things that cannot be denied. It's brought people much closer together. I mean, I can talk to people from the UK. I can talk to people from Russia. I can talk to people from Korea. I can talk to someone from Afghanistan. And I can understand their culture and their perspectives now. And it makes it a lot harder, at least for me, to really say anything, because there's just so many different factors, and there's not really a right opinion, and there's not really a wrong opinion either. I mean, there are things that are really bad to think. That's for sure. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I just don't know what I'm talking about. Sometimes I don't know my own opinions. And when I think I do know them, like when I think I do know my opinions, I end up second guessing myself anyways. I've learned that that's something that people with ADD, like people without hyperactivity, actually end up doing. Is that you're not really focusing on necessarily the right thing or focusing on. And so you don't really. It's sometimes harder to figure out what your opinion really is. So maybe I'm in that boat because I do have ADD. But I mean, that's also another good thing that the internet has brought us, is that we've come to an understanding of what mental health is and what disorders are. I've definitely learned a lot about disorders, more on the internet than I ever have in real life. And who knows if the information that I've learned is actually true, because it's really hard to actually determine that. I mean, yes, you can go to databases and have reliable sources that have cited sources, but I mean, technically speaking, you can cite anything. Technically speaking, you could probably find like research papers about the Earth being flat, and you might have sources for that, multiple sources. Doesn't mean it's right. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you think the Earth is flat, it's a little bit weird. But, I mean, maybe you have... I mean, that is your right, technically speaking. You have the right to believe that the Earth is flat. I mean, technically it's not hurting anyone except science. I just don't know. I think there's a lot of complications. And, I also think that the internet really is hypocritical. I mean, I don't know, man. I think there's just a lot of gray area that it's not always clear what the right answer is. And, I don't envy people who have to actually moderate Twitter and YouTube. Because, I mean, as a moderator myself, I've moderated channels, Discord servers, the whole 9 yards. I've done it all. Well, not all, but I've done a lot to understand that, sometimes as a moderator, it's really hard to determine if someone actually needs to be punished. Sometimes the rules are crystal clear, and some people do things that are really obvious, like it's against the rules, but then some people go into those gray areas, and you're like, well, I mean, technically speaking, it's against the rules, but then also it's not really, and then it's like, who knows, is banning them, too harsh, who knows? Like, a lot of the times, these are real people determining how to enforce the rules, and sometimes it's not always so clear. Especially when you have guidelines like YouTube that literally say that anything on the internet is banned. Or strikeable, or whatever. There's so many gray areas, and you never know how people are really going to react. And sometimes you think that you know, and you think that you're in the right, but you're actually wrong, and then you find out later because people are pissed. And a lot of people don't understand what certain laws actually say. And they don't really understand how, people really don't understand fair use or any of that. And some people have spread misinformation about fair use and all of that. And it's really hard to determine. That sometimes, yeah, you're in the wrong. But anyways, I think that'll be it for today. We are going a little bit long. So we reached an hour, and I think that we've talked about everything that we can talk about, really. I mean, it can always go further, and this subject, that's not really a right answer. Is in conclusion, I think that the internet can be bad sometimes, especially when you're looking at it every day, 24/7. But it's also a really good thing because there's so much that could never be done without it. And I think that is where I will leave it. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. We'll see you guys in the future. And peace out, guys. It's been a blast.